For over 8 decades, the disappearance of Amelia Earhart has mystified and haunted the world. Theories are legion, but hard proof has always been elusive, until now. In 1937, the world watched in wonder as a woman, seemingly born to defy gravity, prepared for her greatest challenge. Amelia Earhart, aviator, icon, and legend, took to the Pacific sky on July 2nd, her silver Lockheed electric glinting in the morning sun. It was to be the final leg of her globe-circling flight, her crowning triumph. But somewhere between Lae, New Guinea, and Howland Island, she vanished. There was no distress call, no wreckage, just silence. For nearly a century, her disappearance has fueled obsession, conspiracy, and myth. Governments scoured vast reaches of ocean. Amateur sleuths pored over maps. And theories multiplied like ghosts in the fog. Among those drawn into the mystery was Rick Gillespie, a former aircraft accident investigator who spent 35 years with one unshakable belief. The truth had always been in plain sight. Dismissed and ridiculed for decades, Gillespie now thinks the world is finally catching up. Recent satellite and drone footage revealed what appeared to be a metallic wreck off the coast of Nikumaroro Island, the very place he had long insisted held the answer. To him, this discovery isn't news, it's confirmation. "Before I die, I must tell the truth," Gillespie said, his voice shaking. "We found it years ago. No one believed us." Amelia Earhart was more than a pilot. She was the face of a new era, the embodiment of bravery and a possibility that knew no bounds. In 1932, she became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic, setting altitude and endurance records that captivated the world. In 1937, when she announced her plan to fly around the globe, the public saw destiny taking flight. Her Lockheed Electra 10E sleek, twin-engine, and futuristic was human ambition at its peak. With her navigator Fred Noonan, she charted a course along the equator, pushing endurance and navigation to their limits. But the final stretch from Lae to the tiny, isolated Howland Island was fraught with danger. Communication was poor, weather uncertain, and navigation perilous. Somewhere over the endless blue expanse, they disappeared. The largest peacetime search in history was mounted by the U.S. Navy. Planes, ships, and thousands of personnel combed the Pacific, but no trace was ever found. Theories abounded. A crash into the deep ocean, captured by the Japanese, or even a secret life under a new identity. Yet the truth eluded everyone. In 1985, Gillespie entered the story not as a dreamer, but as a detective. Having spent his career investigating crashes, he knew how to find meaning in the smallest fragment, a rivet, a photograph, a clue others missed. He founded TIGHAR, the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, to pursue evidence with scientific precision. His theory was bold. Earhart hadn't crashed into the ocean, but had landed on Nikumaroro Island, formerly known as Gardner Island, a remote coral atoll in what is now Kiribati, about 350 miles southeast of Howland. The island matched the last radio signals from Earhart's plane, and to Gillespie, everything pointed there. His team did, over the years, uncover some intriguing clues. Pieces of aluminum consistent with a Lockheed aircraft, a 1930s woman's shoe sole, a zipper pull, and reports from 1940 that described human bones, perhaps those of a tall European woman, that subsequently vanished from colonial archives. Radio transmissions in 1937 seemingly came from that part of the world, too. Still, Gillespie's evidence was circumstantial, and official institutions rejected it. Funding dried up, expeditions sputtered, and the press lampooned him as a man chasing ghosts. By 2017, after 14 expeditions and more than $10 million spent, Gillespie was exhausted. Storms destroyed equipment. Sponsors withdrew, and ridicule replaced respect. Yet he never gave up. The pattern to him was undeniable. Earhart survived the landing and lived for days, perhaps weeks, on the island, until the tides claimed her aircraft. Then, in late 2024, a breakthrough. New AI-assisted satellite imaging reanalyzed old aerial data from the Pacific. Near Nikumaroro's western reef slope, analysts spotted a metallic outline, 38 feet long, symmetrical, and hauntingly familiar. Dubbed the Tyria object, it matched almost exactly the wingspan of Earhart's Lockheed Electra. The coordinates aligned perfectly with the site Gillespie had pointed to since 1991. Overnight, the skeptics had become collaborators. Purdue University, Earhart's alma mater, and the Archaeological Legacy Institute announced a new deep-sea expedition for 2025. For the first time in decades, the world looked to Nikumaroro with fresh eyes. In his Delaware home, now in his late 70s, Gillespie watched the new footage with tears in his eyes. "I knew it," he whispered. "We had it all along. We just didn't have the money or the technology." The confession was an equal part of vindication and sorrow. "If I had another 10 years, I'd be down there myself. But people need to know before I'm gone. Amelia's there, right where we said." The image on his screen looped endlessly, a silvery, coral-covered shape resting in the twilight of the Pacific. After nearly a century, the ocean's greatest secret might finally be ready to surface. The tail assembly seemed visible, bent, but still intact. The fuselage lay half-submerged under coral, its angle indicating that it may have landed intact before being pulled under by ocean currents. Researchers with AI-enhanced imaging enhanced color gradients and shapes, filtering out the coral shadows, and through this came something haunting. The object wasn't random debris. It had the unmistakable geometry of a man-made aircraft. Metallic anomalies consistent with aluminum were found throughout its surface. Old Navy reconnaissance photos from 1938, taken just a year after Amelia Earhart's disappearance, caught faint shapes in the same location shapes no one had noticed until modern imaging rediscovered them. Gillespie's longtime colleagues wept at seeing them. It was the proof they'd always dreamed of, yet proof wasn't enough. Oceanographers cautioned that coral growth could distort structures, and skeptics said it could be a chunk of a World War II shipwreck. But the size and location made it impossible to disregard a coincidence. Meanwhile, researchers re-examined relics from prior expeditions. Aluminum fragments recovered decades ago were retested using advanced methods. The alloy matched a pre-war Lockheed Electra. One piece even seemed to fit a patch added to Earhart's plane during her final refit. Shoe fragments once dismissed as coincidence were found to match 1930s American designs. Radio engineers also re-examined the 1937 distress reports of several amateur radio operators who claimed to have heard faint transmissions across the Pacific. "This is Amelia Earhart," one voice allegedly began, although no recording survived. The coordinates aligned closely with Nikumaroro. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to take shape. In his Delaware home, Rick Gillespie revisited decades of research. Folders labeled Nika 1991, Nika 2010, and Nika 2017 filled with photos, notes, and sketches. Every expedition had brought them closer, but never close enough. Now, technology had finally caught up with faith. Watching old footage of himself yelling into the wind, "She was here," he whispered through tears. "We were right all along." Vindication was bittersweet. Gillespie's health was failing, and the next expedition would leave without him. The institutions which once dismissed his work now led the search, yet none of it would bear his name. Still he smiled. "That's okay," he murmured. The truth was never mine to keep. As they studied the TIGHAR object, the scientists prepared to send in submersible drones for high-resolution scans, hoping to find serial numbers or manufacturing stamps that would link the piece to Earhart's Electra. A confirmation of this fact would solve one of history's greatest mysteries. But beyond the science lay something more, the story of obsession, perseverance, and faith against ridicule. For Gillespie, it was never about the fame or money. It was about closure. For Amelia, her family, and all those who grew up wondering what happened to the woman who dared circle the world. His voice shook in his final interview, but Gillespie's determination did not falter. "You spend your life chasing ghosts," he said quietly. "But I don't think Amelia was ever a ghost. I think she was waiting to be found." The ocean off Nikumaroro is unforgiving. Its currents can drag wreckage into the abyss in hours, corals slowly ingesting the past. But beneath that coral garden, the past may have survived a fragile machine, its aluminum bones glinting beneath layers of salt and time. If the TIGHAR object proves to be the Electra, it will rewrite aviation history. It will mean Earhart didn't simply vanish, she fought to survive. Perhaps she transmitted for days before her radio died. Perhaps she gazed across the lagoon, knowing rescue would never come. The thought is both heartbreaking and awe-inspiring. I imagine her sitting beside the plane. Gillespie once said, writing in her logbook, calm as ever, hoping the world was still listening. Maybe the world wasn't listening then, but it is now. Soon, a new expedition will map the depths around TIGHAR Reef. Cameras will dive into the blue darkness, searching for the glint of metal and rivets lost in time. And somewhere in that silence, perhaps the Pacific will whisper back one final secret. Amelia Earhart's story had been an unfinished sentence for nearly a century. Rick Gillespie dedicated his life to completing it. Whether the TIGHAR object proved his theory or not, his work has already changed how the world remembers her. Before I die, he said, I want people to know we found her. Maybe we didn't raise the plane, but we found the truth. And sometimes the greatest discoveries aren't what we recover, but what we refuse to let sink. As the sun sets over Nikumaroro, the reef is painted pink and gold, the same colors that may have filled the sky that fateful July morning of 1937. The tide washes over coral that hides a secret forged in courage, sealed in salt. The wind whispers with the echoes of engines that once defied the heavens. Beneath those waves, a legend sleeps, waiting for light, waiting for vindication. Somewhere in the world, Rick Gillespie sits in a dark room with maps and old charts. The walls of his office covered with satellite images, notes, and lines. Behind a glass case, a small fragment of corroded metal rests. This is the artifact that he retrieved decades ago from a reef. For anybody else, this fragment is no more than scrap, but to him, it is sacred. The rivet holes match the Lockheed Electra, with new data showing a plane-shaped mass beneath the sea. That same fragment feels like prophecy. He touches it gently, whispering, she was right there, and nobody wanted to see it. Outside, rain murmurs against the windows. His wife, Pat, appears in the doorway, accustomed to these sleepless nights. You're still awake, she says softly. Can't sleep. Not tonight, he replies. She glances at the old photos of his 1991 expedition team, their faces filled with hope. They're talking about you again on the news, she says. That Purdue team, they're using your coordinates. Rick only nods. It's not about credit anymore. I just want to see it confirmed. Pat studies him. You already know it's her, don't you? He pauses and nods. Yes, but knowing and proving are two different things. That single sentence defines his life's work. In the days after the new images broke, the world was once again enthralled with the mystery of Amelia Earhart. News anchors spoke her name as if in resurrection. Social media overflowed with Electra/TIGHAR comparisons. Some experts cautioned restraint. Others said it was the greatest lead in 80 years. But for Rick Gillespie, it was never new. It was history finally catching up. He remembers that day in 1991, standing on the reef, the sun beating down, his team scraping coral for traces of wreckage. Even then, he believed she was beneath his feet. They found an aluminum fragment, Artifact 2-2V1, its rivet pattern unique, matching the repaired section of Earhart's plane. Gillespie had been so sure. This is it, he said, but the scientific community dismissed it as inconclusive and funding vanished. The fragment was shelved, another forgotten clue. Decades later, that fragment may hold the key. In January 2025, a new sonar survey was conducted off the reef slope of Nikumaroro by an independent oceanographic team. Perhaps the start of the final chapter in aviation's greatest mystery.